Thank you for bearing with me, and also apologies for last week. Not to start on a morose or sad note, but my little boy was not well, and so I would not have been in my right frame of mind if I was going to be doing a webinar. So apologies for last week, but thank you everyone for bearing with me. First of all, my name is Austin. I am the Global Product Manager, as Adora mentioned. I've been with Instructure for about 3 years. I moved back to Australia last August. So I did the 2 weeks of quarantine with an 11-month-old, which I cannot recommend as the worst $4,000 that I've potentially ever spent. To give you a bit of background about me, I'm a bit of a one-trick pony in that I've only ever been in EdTech and LMS. I'm particularly passionate about anything that humanizes a learning experience to be something that I would deem as more realistic or more real. So a lot of what I do is at Instructure, maybe to go over what my role is as a global product manager, is I don't have a specific area, and I'll jump screens really quickly because a lot of people don't know this about Instructure is, and I'll scroll down really quickly, but this is sort of all of our different teams. We have different product managers, and you'll also notice up here at the top, there's core features that are attached to each one of these. And this is very deep at Instructure. We have a very, very horizontally wide expertise in each department. And so what my role specifically as a global product manager is to take all of these disparate projects, look at what we're doing in the different regions of APAC and regionalize, but also feedback to our central product areas about what things Australia in particular might need, or for that matter, Asia or New Zealand or wherever else. In a sort of just a quick, the random bit about me is that in 2015, I started as a joke, something called Autopsy, which was the largest data source on failed startups. And it went viral overnight, sort of 300,000 people within 24 hours looked at it. And it was essentially gathering all the learnings from failed startups. And the reason that I did that is my background in Australia, a newly minted unicorn, something called Go1, which is an EdTech company that targets primarily businesses, is a whole bunch of group of high school mates of mine. So I'm one of the original 5 of Go1. And so that was, startups are a very polarizing thing. And so I was interested in providing a better network for what do you do if you fail? So in my spare time, when I'm not thinking about Canvas, I listen to people cry about their failed startups, which is an interesting experience. So that's just a little brief about me. And I thought I'd kick off the intent of today is probably my most popular question that I'm asked is, what is Instructure building in 2022? And that's completely valid. What I find is difficult is to sort of go through feature by feature, what things are we focused on? Because also that would be a fairly dry presentation as well, as the applicability of individual things is sometimes hit and miss, as you can imagine. So instead, what I wanted to do is to talk about the 5 themes that we are seeing most commonly and what we are focused on in 2022 thematically. Because I find that's a lot easier. If I talk about collaboration and some of the areas that we're looking at inside of collaboration, I think it's easier to contextualize. This is how Instructure is viewing things, and maybe this is how we need to begin to plan. We talk to thousands upon thousands of institutions on an annual basis and would love to talk to as many of you as we can. Which is why I'd be really keen to start off with a quick poll, because the areas that we are particularly focused on are these top 5 challenges. So I'd be really keen to hear from everyone. And Zoom is really annoying with how it deals with longer questions, is what I've just learned from this. But essentially, maybe what I'll go through is from top to bottom is I want to know what things are most important for you in 2022. And that's things from like, we are seeing increased demand for online learning and how do we make it better? We are seeing how do we enrich our course content with things like video and how do we make that more effective? The third one is around arming students for success and ensuring that things are remaining applicable. Other thing is this idea of personalized learning at scale and how that's notoriously difficult to do. And there's a couple of things that Instructure is doing to make that easier. And lastly is the idea of what can we do with the data that exists for us at the moment, and then how do we also leverage maybe new data that we aren't using. Thank you for those who have responded. This is already great. I can see that there's a bit of
a, yeah, I'm just watching the answers come in as well.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing the rising demand for better online course education as a clear leader so far.
Yeah, fairly clear leader. This is great. This is great for us. And it could obviously be something else. What I'm really happy is there's not a ton of something else's. So I'm always interested if we are on the money with in a variety of ways with what we're doing. So so thank you everybody for participating in that. That's really helpful. Maybe to start, what I was keen to go through is many years ago, and I'm talking like 2015, 2016, if someone said Instructure, they pretty much always meant Canvas. It was sort of synonymous that if you said Canvas, you meant Instructure. If you said Instructure, you meant Canvas. But that is absolutely no longer the case. Instructure, and you'll see this a lot if you've seen a lot of our comms in the last few months, but Instructure is heavily focused on being an effective platform. And we have our own tools, which are at the top here. You'll see there's these, that whether you're using Canvas or Instructure tools for professional development, whether you're using it in K-12 for learning management, whether you're using it in K-12 for assessment or in higher educations for online programs and content, or for analytics, which is usually tied to one of those others. These are sort of the bread and butter of what Instructure does. But sort of underneath that is this initial idea of our infrastructure as a platform. It's one of the key reasons that people will come to us is this idea of cloud first, and that we sort of have an incredible support structure. And it's these sort of infrastructure that a lot of the reasons why people come to us. And then the second thing that's sort of in this idea of the Instructure learning platform, if we go a layer down into services, is some of the things that we do as well as a service business, whether it's through a partner of ours that does instructional design, or a partner that supports things like implementation, but also in integrations and training. And the last of all, which we are really, I would say that services and platform infrastructure are things that have been hallmarks of Instructure for the last 5 or 6 years. What we are really keen as well of improving in the next 12 to 18 months to 24 months is how do we better enable a partner ecosystem that allows more tools to come into the market by making it easier for developers to build on top of Instructure products, but to bring in strategic partners and LTI apps and content partners, all of these different learning tools that we bring in. So when we say Instructure, a lot of the time what we talk about this idea is the ILP or the Instructure learning platform is actually, and forgive the buzzword, but quite an ecosystem of our infrastructure and our services and this partner ecosystem. So that's maybe to give you a little bit of context. A lot of the themes that maybe you'll see here are in support of some of these initiatives that makes it easier for you to find if there's a wonderful tool that Canvas doesn't have that's ancillary or additional that you could then leverage and bring into your own ecosystem. So back to the sort of topics of today, which is here are, and we have done, even in the last 12 months, something like 7,500 different data point survey questions to people, as well as user interviews. And these are some of the coalesced thoughts that we've had because of that. And the first one is on the demand for online learning. And so maybe we'll spend a fair chunk of time here because it seems like that's key for a lot of folks, which is that, and this was before COVID-19, but obviously this has exacerbated this whole process. So regardless of whether or not you're in higher education or in training organizations that do into corporates, for example, this is an ever increasing demand area for folks, particularly maybe in higher education. There's this focus on relevance and how do we make things more applicable? How do we make online learning? How do we do it well? Maybe you're at the complete other side of the spectrum, is you've only ever done face-to-face, and you are my favorite, folks. I love, because it's so much easier to cause such a great impact. But there's a lot of themes here for this increased demand for online learning. For example, a PwC report found that half of the jobs in 2025 that will exist don't exist at the moment. And so there's a huge focus on how do we demonstrate, whether it's a 2 to 4 year degree program or you're a K-12 that's focusing on competency-based education, how do we enable students and users and employees to demonstrate these skills and to have a focus on skills that are for the future. There's a World Economic Forum very interesting list of skills for the future. And I've seen a number of institutions begin to map their content towards this. And it's not, I think that when people think of skills for the future, the immediate thought is, oh, data science, or I need to have a machine learning algorithm. I don't think that's the case. I did a large piece of work with a staffing company called Adecco, and they, at any given moment, this was in the UK, had 1 million jobs that they did not have a person that could fill that role because of skills. And typically the skills that we're trying to focus are much simpler than you would think. That this idea of sometimes it's Excel or knowing Microsoft products or project management or communication skills or stakeholder engagement management. It's these sorts of things that when we begin to map our content towards. I've also spoken to a number of K-12s that feel that as this doesn't apply, and it absolutely does in K-12 institutions as well, is how are we supporting a user such that when they enter university or they enter the workforce, that's a more cushioned experience by showing, and I've seen an increased demand anecdotally in the last 12 months of how do we bring things, even in things like the parents, and improve the way that we are demonstrating to parents, tech-enabled, that we are teaching towards skills. So Instructure is looking at this in a variety of ways. Because that's the problem. The challenge is that it's exponentially increasing, this demand for online learning. And the way that we're looking at this, if you look at these bullet points on the right, is a couple of things. The first things maybe to highlight from these bullet points, and everyone can read those, you can see it. But I think in particular is there's a lot of different microservices that Instructure has, whether that's using catalog to help people purchase content, or it's using, I don't know, Videri to get analytics or reports. What we want to make sure is that there is a seamless experience. I think that software is like food, in that with food, we taste first with our eyes. And if it is difficult, or if it is hard, or if there are a lot of steps, and that goes for a student or an educator, as well as a teacher or an administrator. If those things are difficult to administrate, the likelihood that I will adopt it dramatically decreases. One of the other things that we're focused on is social online learning, and you will see throughout 2022 us bringing in more partners, but also redesigning and looking at a number of the things that we do for peer review and peer learning. We recently partnered with a great product that I'm really impressed with at the moment called inspace.chat, that is similar to something like Microsoft Teams, that has more educational tools for administrators. Canvas isn't or Instructure isn't a Microsoft. We don't have 70,000 employees. So for us, sometimes we ruthlessly prioritize about what things we will focus on. But I can guarantee that in the space of things like social and collaborative, we are not finished acquiring custom vendors that we work with or partners and better integrating that into the experience. But two, we're not finished at redesigning and building our own things. So I think when you're looking at this increased demand for online learning, being really practical, because that, as you saw, was one of my key things that I like, is people want to learn from one another in a way that is non-confrontational, or they want feedback in a way that is effective. But they also, as they're learning and they're going through your programs, they want to know it is relevant and it is applicable. And the way that some of the things that we're supporting towards that is in micro-credentialing pathways, that people can see as they progress through an experience that they are acquiring skills that they think are relevant and applicable. So maybe I'll take a quick pause. Please feel free at any given moment. I'm fairly rubbish at reading chat, but blessedly the Instructure team here is happy to. If there are questions along this way about how are we focused on, I don't know, video collaboration. Maybe I've set myself up there to talk about video collaboration. But if there's something specific that you want to talk about in chat, please feel free. And I'm happy to pause in between each of these challenges to talk about whether it's anecdotally or who we see doing this well. Happy to provide more context here.
Austin, there's just some chatter in the chat just in regards to the reporting.
Chat.
Yeah, just about some of the reporting that comes from Canvas in terms of, you know, grade exports, things like that. The analytics behind it as well. So there's some comments around that's happening at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's a big topic, which my fifth area is data, and we'll go through some of the things that we're doing in that space. A lot is the answer. And if okay, I would love to, I will give a better answer then about what we're doing for data things.
We do have one coming through from Patina, who is asking, what might social learning tools look like?
Yeah, I think there's a variety. I think a lot of times what people are looking for is initially a collaboration piece, is how do we help or enable users to discuss things? And there's a lot of tools that do that, whether you're using like a Microsoft Teams, or if you're using in general, just a very active webinar approach with things like Zoom, that you want to engage folks in webinars and online chat. I think collaboration is typically the first step, that when anyone looks at social, how do we actually enable a user to chat to another user? There are three major LTIs that, let's take Microsoft, for example, that Instructure works with, which is around like, how do we bring in things from OneDrive? How do we bring things from Microsoft Teams? There's a lot of things still. Some is being worked on currently by Microsoft. Some things are currently being worked on by us. And to give you an example, let's say in Canvas, you create an assignment group, and it automatically assigns 5 users to be in an assignment group together. One thing that Microsoft is working on, and we've done the work on our side, is to automatically create a Teams channel that includes all of those users. So the instant they are assigned an assignment, that there is a place for them to collaborate. See another question about online exam invigilation and proctoring.
Yeah.
This is a fairly polarizing topic at Instructure, if I'm honest. This is unlikely something that we will build internally, and will rely on partners to do. A lot of reasons for that. Probably not something that, I have time to get into today, other than the fact that we think there are players who are doing this okay in the market, and we would sort of see this currently outside of a core of what Canvas would do.
Yeah. The
next major challenge that we are seeing at the moment is video in the classroom. So I know that I'm not going to need to convince you all that video is a good thing. Like when I started doing LMS back in 2010, that was the big pitch. I had to say that video is a good thing, please include video. But now it is more about how do we improve the way that we're doing video, or what are best practices? How do we take a 2-hour lecture and make it more applicable? Or when a student goes home, how do we improve the things that they're able to access as part of homework, etc.? Or if you are a training organization, how do you make your content more engaging? And we are looking at this in a variety of ways. Probably one of my most common questions is, how do I get the other educators at my institution to use Canvas like this one person we have, and she is phenomenal as an administrator, as a teacher of Canvas? How do we get everybody else to similarly be as good as this one user? That's a really common thing. Educators are on a really wide spectrum. You'll have some teachers who are exceptional at this and create wonderful content, and then you have some that you are dragging into the LMS, sometimes kicking and screaming. One of the things that we've learned from surveys is that oftentimes what one of the barriers is, oh, thank you so much for someone asking that, for James asking the chat. I will come to that in just a heartbeat. Yeah. One of the things that we've found that sometimes prevents users from being an A+ Canvas user is that it is oftentimes, we want to improve how easy it is to create great things quickly. And whether that's integrating something like H5P, that you can quickly create a resource and bring into something like Canvas. But also, for example, in Studio, one of the big plans for very early next year is to provide really easy editing tools so that somebody can trim, cut, add, splice a video very fast so that they can deliver, or we are again cutting the barriers to somebody adding in a video resource. But also towards the end of next year, we want to better integrate. At the moment, I've got, for example, like a seamless integration with things like Vimeo and YouTube, but let's go one step further. Like we talked about these collaboration tools like Teams, for example, and towards the end of next year, one of the things that we want to look at is how do we bring in and make a Teams, let's say, video, a studio resource. So being able to embed a quiz question that at a certain point throughout an existing webinar tool like Zoom, for example, that provides all the functionality of being able to make a shorter, quicker, bite-sized components by breaking up video content, for example, into current collaboration tools and bringing that in. Definitely a focus. And throughout next year, you will see a number of things that are aligned to this, which is that there are great tools. InSpace is one of them that we want to better integrate into something like Studio, or generally into a course that makes video assets easier to not only upload, but also to consume. We want to go to where users are. And if users are using Teams, we want to build things that make that, that's where they are. So the answer to James, I suppose, is bear with. Definitely a focus at some point in the next year. And I'm always really scared. My life is sort of like I want to give you exact dates. It's really hard to do in my life, to give you exact dates about when those sorts of things happen. But yeah, super keen is the answer. Great deal. So that's sort of like the second major theme, or this idea of virtual or video in the virtual classroom. There's a lot of things to get positive, quick impact, and there are great. For example, there's a product that I recently really enjoyed that is dirt cheap called Genially, that it's spelled sort of funky, so I will I put it into the chat. That provides really great tools that if you're wanting to enrich video content in a really cheap way, I think it is H5P, but 5x better. So a lot of different things there.
We've just got a couple of questions that you might be able to answer just quickly. From Jeremy, is there anything to be more capabilities to add more interactivity within Canvas courses, for example, drop-downs, hotspots, accordions, etc.? And then Cheryl has asked, can you give an example of interactive tools we can use?
Well, hopefully Genially and H5P are good examples then. I've just put the other one into the chat. And of course, our own product studio to embed interactive quiz questions. So to answer the first one, which is how do we make it sort of easier to access learning and content? This is very institution to institution about how you have this set up. The best way is to leverage LTIs and have that sync very well. There is a more expensive one, Kylie. There is one called Branch Track, which is even worse. If we're talking about scale of pricing, I think there's a really wide spectrum. Please take a look at Genially if that's something that you're interested in creating content. I think it's something like $25 a month for an educator license, which as opposed to the $1,000 that it costs to build SCORM files for a license is, I think, fairly reasonable. But I know that sometimes in certain areas and sectors, any amount of money is a lot of money, and I understand that. And so we want to make some of these things native, like a Vimeo or a YouTube. And if your institution leverages something like Studio, which is Instructure's product that does virtual classrooms, or not virtual classrooms, sorry, that does video, that's something you could look at as well. Okay, the third major area, and this was, I think, a very close, it was a second and third between data and this one, and for student success. So this one is obviously, we get this one. We want, whether you are in an institution with like a 2 to 4 year degree program, or if you are a college, or if you are a K-12, we are hyper focused on improving student outcomes. And there's a lot of things with that, with people are justifying. I have a mate who was recently accepted as into an MBA program at a prestigious institution that he put off because he felt it wasn't a good time. And we know that that's not necessarily a common story, but it is more complex than it has been in the past. And I think this last line here, I think, is really accurate, which is that there is an enormous amount of pressure on institutions. And I feel you there. And we want Instructure to help support you here. And there is a lot. I would say this is one of the key areas that we are focused on in the next 6 to 12 months. And you'll see a number of things, some that will come out shortly in the community about what we're looking at doing in this. But the sort of theme of student success is interventions that the student can intervene on their own behalf, that they have access to their own data that they can see, but we want to give you tools to help you identify and support things like at-risk students, is to provide teachers with additional tools to help, whether it's credentialing support, or we want to give teachers the ability of using something like maybe a product like Portfolium that provides these pathway structures, and we want to support there. I think there's a number of things, including this is something that we looked at a long time ago, but this idea of nudges. How do we support things like a nudge that we can get users back in? I think 5 years ago, even a nudge in the form of an SMS was outrageously effective. It's just not now. That is not something that we are seeing. There's a lot of noise. Students do not open school emails. And so there's a lot of interventions that we want to make. I have another really great friend who is a lecturer at a large Australian university. And sometimes she will tell me stories of they're a Canvas user, will tell me stories that she has individually messaged students and received a really diverse replies from users who do not want her contacting them again, or people who are so grateful that she makes those efforts. And so we are increasingly focused from the idea of providing teachers dashboards that they can identify and support at-risk students, versus building things like pathways that continue to support this relevance or applicability, that we are demonstrating to students why they should be doing these things and the skills that they're acquiring throughout this time, but also is helping prospective employers identify students that have those skills, and we're giving people a more realistic CV, or more almost like a living CV, that they can demonstrate the things that they're learning, or demonstrate the skills that they have through the things that they've learned. So maybe a quick pause to see if there's anything additional about this, but I think maybe what will be music to some ears is that we are fairly laser focused on how do we help you support at-risk students. And there's going to be a number of interventions that we'll look at over the next 12 months that do exactly this in hopefully an elegant and simple way. Dashboards displaying master levels would be amazing. Would they be visible to parents, observers also? There's a number of, there is a Q&A section that I'm doing a poor job at bringing up. I see it.
I'm reading some of the questions from there, Austin.
I'll read the ones from chat really quick, and then I'll go to the Q&A ones if there's any Q&A ones. So dashboards displaying mastery levels, agreed. And there is if anyone on our team can quickly go in and show in the chat, there is a brand new that's coming out mid-September, and the next deploy is a whole redesign of the administrative functionalities of managing outcomes. Outcomes are fairly polarizing at our institutions. Some swear by them. I will admit outcomes take a lot to build. And a lot of the problems that when someone isn't using outcomes, for example, typically one of the problems is that the initial barrier to entry is high. In that there feels like there needs to be this whole exercise in mapping your organizational content towards outcomes, but even sometimes in defining what the outcome is. I would strongly encourage to take a look at the new outcome management tool. There's a number of things there that I think make that easier, but also very soon to come out is the ability of clicking on the outcome and visually seeing a map of what components lead up to that outcome. So yeah, please, there's a new community post that if I can speedily get, I will, but
there's just a question in the Q&A section from Benjamin. Is better integration with Google Workspace planned, particularly with Drive collaborations and embedding docs sheets into Canvas pages?
Yeah. That is something that I'll have to ask specifically. From a high level, it's obviously Google and Microsoft that we focus on primarily initially when it comes to LTI access and integration, particularly things like rich content editor. So the answer is yes, there's always things that we're working on in that area. Some things are on Google's side, some things are on our side. Happy to do a follow-up with what things specifically are planned there.
Perfect. And just from Blythe, can we have rubrics designed to go EA to show growth left to right?
Okay. Great question, Blythe. Thank you very much. So Jody is our product manager in this. I know that she has met with a ton of our folks around here. Yes is the answer. It is very soon, as in Q1 2022, there's some accessibility changes to rubrics. I agree. It is, if you have a lot of data, rubrics are sometimes a pain. And I will, as someone who has taught courses from Canvas, it is a pain for me too. There is a whole rubrics redesign and a whole Learning Mastery Gradebook redesign that, again, there should be a community post that's coming out really soon that is about that. It is very soon is the answer about when we're looking at that rubric redesign.
Cool. Do you have time for one more, Austin, or did you want to continue?
What's the time? Yep, one more.
Yep, one more. So from Benjamin, is there an ETA on when new quizzes will have all the features that are missing that were in classic quizzes?
Obviously, there's when people sort of say classic quizzes versus new quizzes, There's usually a couple of areas they're talking about without sort of knowing the specific one. Probably midway through next year is a good indicator for when there'll be parity. But also they are working on in Q1 more robust quiz question types, and Q2, so H1 next year is something that they are actively looking at.
Perfect, thanks.
Just for I saw there was another one about pictures and new quizzes. Happy to do another quick. Oh, there you go, Adam. Adam would like to answer that live. Thanks, Adam.
I'm going to throw you under the bus for that one.
Yes, that is planned. When relatively soon, there's a lot of new quizzes components that are pending that will drop before end of year. The reason I'm marginally hesitant is there are some that are going to drop before the end of this year and some that are early next. And I'm not, I don't want to put us to which ones will go where. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, there's, yeah, cheers, Paul, for that in the chat. There's a specific blog about classic quizzes, and she doesn't, Sue in that doesn't exactly go into parody, but it's a really great step. Yeah. Okay, the next challenge is around personalized learning. This one is really, I empathize, this one's really hard to do at scale. That's typically the problem. So whether you're in a higher education institution and you are trying to create branching pathways using Canvas, if user doesn't score well here, put them into this track, that sort of thing. Or you're in a K-12 or RTO where you're demonstrating competency, we realize this is really hard to do at scale. And actually, this is where I added in the component about how difficult it is to reach users often, is that unsolicited text messages are considered intrusive, and how do we personalize that learning? And we're looking at this in a ton of different ways. It's hard to, we're looking at this from an acquisition standpoint and also some additional things that we want to build. But there are particularly some tools that we are wanting, one of which I talked about already, which is improved outcome-based administrative and management features to make outcomes a little bit easier for you to utilize. When looking at the utilization rates of outcomes, as I mentioned, it's quite polarizing or sporadic, its use between different areas. Some different departments use it versus others. Some have created outcomes for a number of just a number of STEM, for example, subjects. And so we understand that this is, we want to make this easier so that it is, in terms of deployment, it is simpler to do that across the whole organization. But the other way that we are approaching the personalized learning is things that I've talked about in terms of things like Microsoft Teams further integrating, or our partnership recently with InSpace.chat, which is another one. We want to make it easier for a teacher to connect with a user, or an instructor to connect with a user. Part of that is improving. There's a project happening at the moment of looking at things like peer review, and peer review including something like a mentor or a user that isn't necessarily the same role as a teacher or somebody else. How do we look at peer review? And we are actively hunting for current existing or current folks to give us feedback about what things would you love to see more in peer review. So if you have some thoughts, we are at the moment actively looking at how we approach this in 2022, or what things people would like to see. I think that, yeah, the competency-based education isn't going anywhere for us. And it is a theme for next year that you'll see additional work on. And that's things like Portfolium. They are doubling and tripling down on, if you aren't aware, Instructure has a portfolio tool that does things like pathways. And that's something that we are doubling and tripling down into. Great. A couple other questions from the Q&A.
Yeah. So one from Jennifer, is there an ETA on student access rubrics for self-evaluation and reflective practice?
So part of this is in the current discussions for peer review redesign. And do we bring in a specific accessible rubric, or how do we do generally best practice for reflective tools? There is a wealth of data and studies that have gone into this already. No one needs to convince us of it. It is just, how do we prioritize this onto roadmap? And that is certainly, we are looking at peer review in the next 12 months. There's a question around how do I make Canvas work for myself as a small institution versus like a very large institution. And I would suggest that there is there's a number of things that we are doing. One of the things for K-12 that we released in the last year was something called Homeroom, which gave for K-5 students a really clear, I wish that I had put it in, and I'm not going to quickly find the screenshots, but it essentially provides a smaller, thinned down version of a dashboard that just shows them what do they have to do next. What's the next assignment? When's the next due date? Which is simpler for K-5. One of the things that we found when we released that is that there was much more interest in this redesigned dashboard that was optimized around submissions. So if you are a smaller team with smaller staff, one of the things that we have discovered is, as part of this K-5 or K-12 approach to the new homeroom, is that if you are an organization that has just a few courses, this focus on due dates and next steps. Even if you're an MBA program, we've had a lot of interest from our further education programs about if the person is more, if the user is coming from a corporate environment, that actually approach, even though we designed that for K1 through 7, there's a lot of interest in that as well. I would suggest that if you're thinking that Canvas is a V8 engine and you are sort of happy at different paces, then there's a lot of things you can do to simplify the experience. Yeah. I would definitely recommend talking to your CSM. Our CSMs have just a wealth of information that they are a superb addition. I see Bobby has asked a question. So Bobby's asked a question about one of the additional apps that are attached to Canvas called Atomic Jolt, which is a search tool. And should those things be core? Sorry, forgive me, that we wish that was core versus having to purchase an additional tool like Atomic Jolt to do that. If you are a user of Catalog, early next year is work planned to improve search functionality. So if you're an RTO or if you leverage Catalog at your education institution, that is something that you will see very shortly being worked on, is improved search that doesn't necessarily make Atomic Jolt redundant, but if you're using Catalog, we'll go through that. I certainly agree. I think Atomic Jolt has some amazing metadata searching capability that there are some things that we would love to incorporate into Canvas eventually. Okay. Yeah, this is, forgive me, I was planning to take 45 minutes, and apologies, I'm a little bit over. Story of my life. However, there is a really great question that's just coming through the chat from Andrew that I just want to quickly talk about, which is that is the homeroom coming to 6 to 12? Yes, I was recently talking to a high school institution or a K-12 that, even though we have named it K-5, I will admit, I wish that we hadn't named it K-5. I think that was really silly on our behalf, because I absolutely think that this has please try it in your 6 to 12. I am certain that you will get good feedback from, maybe not in senior. I think that's when I think the new K5 homeroom begins to fall off. There you go. I just called it K5 by accident. The new homeroom begins to fall off. If you are, I would love your feedback, because I'd be so keen if you start using that from 6 to 12 and there's some specific feedback that doesn't work. I would be really keen to hear your feedback and pass it on to the homeroom team. They would be extremely interested in the feedback from, we tried to apply this to senior school and we found X. But I do absolutely believe that from 6 to 12 or grade 6 to 10, I can see a really clear plug and play application to the homeroom features. And so Royston, for those who don't know him, is in the chat. He is our K-12 regional director in Asia, and he has sort of also brought in his personal experience from that, is when he is talking to his high school or his 6 to 12 customers, that it's a similar interesting, that they are getting good feedback. And thank you as well about K to 11. Very interested. Okay. The last one, I should have left more time for this. Okay. Okay, data, I get. So whether it's from a privacy standpoint, we need to ensure that we are safely storing data, versus if we are wanting to get at our data. Instructure is doing this in a couple of ways. One of which is Canvas Data 2. Canvas Data 2 is something that you may have heard about if you're familiar with Instructure comms for the last 12 months. We have a number of customers who are currently still in beta and getting wonderful, wonderful feedback. But the play or the plan for Canvas Data 2 is, if I bring us back to the idea of a Instructure learning platform, we want to make it easier for a developer to build on top of Instructure, or build on top of our infrastructure. And if we do that, we make it so that there are 5 different tools that do feedback, and naturally drive their prices down and enrich the capability of the others by simply there being additional features that are being released for that. So if we make it easier for these folks to create content, what we want to do as the platform is to ensure that we are making it extremely easy to bring in all of these disparate data sources. So the aim for Canvas Data 2, for example, is to, regardless, to be agnostic of tool, to be able to create a central source of information. Canvas Data 2 in Q1 will move out of Q1 next year. It will move out of beta. It might be slightly sooner than that, but Q1 is a really great yardstick for when Canvas Data 2. If you're interested, towards the end of the year, we will go out again to market to bring in people who want to be beta customers of Canvas Data 2. We would, of course, adore and love your feedback. So that's one element of bringing in more live data sources into Canvas Data 2. I think the other piece is creating a better analytics dashboards that do really simple things like aggregating numbers of assignments and users and submissions, etc. I was literally in a very lengthy thread internally, and then we again brought it up in our weekly Canvas product manager meeting about doing exactly this. We will certainly in the next 12 months be releasing additional analytics dashboards that give people more rich information about what is happening across their user base. Great. Well, apologies to, if people are interested, coming up in a few weeks, we will, there is the product manager for Canvas Data 2 is spending some time with our HE user group. So if anyone, what we might do is record that, and but she is producing 2 different articles that will go live in the next month about updates to Canvas Data 2. So bear with is the answer to that one as well about Canvas Data 2. Okay, maybe just to quickly sum up, We focused on sort of these 5 educational challenges, and I talked about a number of the features that are coming around demand for online learning and how do we improve how you're delivering training. We talked about a number of the tools that you can use, that some that are expensive and some that are free, and some that are our enrichment of our own product studio, which is video in the virtual classroom. You'll get new interactive quiz type questions that are coming for studio next year, as well as, if you're very techie, additional API stuff, as well as towards the end of next year, interoperability of studio and things like Teams and Big Blue Button, if anyone's using BBB. We talked about student success and wanting to create, and this is connected to personalized learning, but nudges and additional mechanisms that a teacher can intervene and support student success. And that's as things like having a student success dashboard as well, and matriculation and at risk. Definitely something that we are very keen on. We talked about personalized learning and what we're wanting to do to personalize learning at scale. A renewed focus on outcomes and competency-based education. If you've not seen our product, and this will depend a little bit on the market that you're in, is Portfolium, which does personalized learning or creating pathways. That is acquisition of skills, as well as the last one, putting data to work around Canvas Data 2 and some work around, on top of our current analytics dashboards, some additional stuff that you can start seeing as well. So I realize there's like 5 minutes left, but if anyone has any additional questions, I'm happy to field any of those. We probably have time for 1 or 2.
Just having a look at the Q&A section, Austin. I think the team have it covered for the moment. And yeah, nothing that's coming through from the chat either. Okay.
Well, from my side, I am always keen to hear your experience using Canvas or Instructure products. And so if there's some specific feedback that you would like to give, we are always open to listening to challenges that you're facing and what can we do to innovate further. I get that oftentimes there's a very long laundry list attached to things that we want Instructure or Canvas to do. And we've delivered already some superb, amazing things this year that we're really proud of, and we will before the end of the year as well. And 2021, these are the sort of themes that you'll see, features that are coming out from Instructure. But wonderful to spend an hour with you all.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, Austin. It was great to, gain some visibility and some insight into what is potentially around the horizon for Canvas, and also to be able to share that with our clients as well. As always, if anyone has any questions following this webinar or about anything else that they'd like to discuss, please do reach out to your CSM team. Like Rio mentioned earlier on, we will be posting the recording of this webinar to our community page. You can always review it at a later time or pass it on to anyone that wasn't able to make it today. Thank you very much, everyone, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.